part of the agenda. So, just kind of let's get started with some introductions, with some agenda. So today's topic is going to be reading comprehension. So that's something that some of you wanted. And I realized that there is a lot of things on reading comprehension, correct? So, and it's beyond the scope for me to teach you reading comprehension in an online webinar. It's probably beyond my scope to, kind of ask you to solve questions also, because see what happens is online platform like this, even something as simple as asking questions can become a little messy, correct? Because I have to put a passage and then I have to take you through the 8 questions, right? So a lot of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it simple. As I promised, I'm going to take you through 5 secrets or 5 things that you need to know about reading comprehension. So the assumption here is that you have, to some extent, done reading comprehension, correct? So I'm assuming that you're either as part of Crackverbal or otherwise in your preparation you have kind of focused on maybe solving a bunch of passages. Okay, so that's the expectation from today's webinar from your side, correct? That's the kind of expectation that I have, right? With that, let's just kind of get into the ground rules. It's very simple, couple of things. One is, we will try to, so we started at 10:30, we will try to go all the way till 12 o'clock. I will try to wrap up what I have so that we have the last 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So even for the Q&A, I'll be giving you specific points where I'll ask you for a question. And over here, if you see, there is one for questions. You see there is a Q&A. That's a different box. So if you are going to ask me a question for which you need me to think and respond, then please put it onto the Q&A box. If it is just a hi, or if it's just something that you want to talk, you can put it in the chat window. The thing is, from my side, I actually don't get to see the chat window. I actually keep it disabled. There is also an option to raise hand. I really don't know what it does, but I wouldn't be able to kind of look at it while the session is going on, right? So I will tell you, okay, specifically at this point saying, okay, now I'm done with what I had to say. Do you have any questions for me? Correct? So when I have question, when I ask you for that, then at that point, put the questions. Before that, I would not be able to. And just as I'm saying, someone just raised hand, okay? So I have no clue what this raised hand does. So if you want to play around, you can do that. But really in this environment, I'll be going ahead and telling you what I have to share so that we have maximum utilization of the time, right? Because see, for me, what's very important is that the next 1 hour, okay, has to be the most useful 1 hour that you should have spent on reading comprehension, or for that matter for GMAT, the whole of this week, right? That's the kind of challenge that I set for myself, saying, what is it that I can add in terms of value? So we will take Q&A when, as and when we get there, but just wanted to keep that as a protocol. Also, in case you're not able to hear me, and quite a few of you are not able to hear me, let's say my voice breaks, or you are having some kind of other issues, wait for some 10 minutes and then check if one of you is able to listen to me, okay? Even if one of you is able to listen to me, I'm going to assume that all of you, the problem is not from my side, okay? It is when at least, like if all of you have this problem, then perhaps it's an issue at my end. Hey, I'm in India, right? Power could go off, internet connection could go off. You never know what happens, right? Cool. Just a little bit background about myself. My name is Arun, and I'm the founder of Crackverbal. So people ask me, Arun, where are you from? It's a very tough question for me to answer. It's a very tough question for me to answer. Just one second. So, I am actually Tamil. So my parents are from Tamil Nadu, but I spent quite a few years in Gujarat. And then, in fact, almost 22 years. So I spent in a nice little place called Baroda, in case you have heard of it, Vadodara, as it's correctly called. And then in 2003, I actually moved to Bangalore. So I was in the tech sector. So I started my career programming, coding, but I also had this passion for teaching. So alongside my full-time job, I would teach on weekends. In fact, here is a very interesting trivia. The first topic that I actually taught was reading comprehension. So this is way back in 2002. I'm pretty sure 2000, it's not even 2002, it's 2001, right? And I'm pretty sure 2001, most of you were in school, okay? And I really hope most of you were born, right? But most of you were in school, but that's really how I started teaching. And the thing was, I was actually good at standardized tests, right? So that's also a trivia fact. I'm a member of Mensa. Excuse me. That's a society for high intelligence. It's kind of taken as the top 2 percentile of the world population. And they have this very interesting test, okay? It's kind of a puzzle, and there are a bunch of puzzles, right? And there is no maths, there is no English. Most of these puzzles are based on patterns. And, I took the test and I kind of qualified for Mensa. So, I also thought, well, there is something that I think, I'm able to figure out a lot easier. So maybe I could help my friends by giving them a peek into what I'm thinking. And that's really how I got into teaching, started with friends. And then very soon I started teaching for test prep companies. In fact, my first job, part-time job was, at a CAT coaching company. So I was into CAT coaching. So 2001 till almost 2005. 2005 is when I actually moved on to the dark side. I came on to GMAT, and it's been 13 years that I've been teaching GMAT, so it's a long time. And I have taught thousands of students. And if you've heard of the famous 10,000 hour rule, I probably qualify for it, because when you've been teaching something for so long, it just comes to you a lot more naturally. So I think I've just taken my passion. In fact, this is one message that I have for most people when people ask, saying, sometimes we hold ourselves hostage to our education, our background, our expectation of what we should be, and to a large extent, when I was a delivery manager for a product-based company in Bangalore, correct, I had all the trappings of corporate life, and things were going well for me, but for me to basically say, no, this is really not what I want to do, and teaching is where I want to get to, was a tough call, but it's a call that I've never regretted. So that's pretty much getting to know me a little. About Crackverbal, so as I said, 2005 I started teaching GMAT, and then 2006 is when I started teaching GMAT at Crackverbal. That's when we started Crackverbal, and over the last many years we have grown from being one-man show to now being a team where we have a set of great faculty, we have great content, we have online programs. So, and I think a large extent of our success has been students being successful, because as in education, and there's a lot of talk about edtech companies, and people ask me, so what do you think about the edtech space? And what I tell them is, see, technology cannot solve problems, right? The best tuition teacher, when I was in school, wasn't a guy who used technology necessarily, correct? If you look at most places where you look at colleges, the reason why IIM Ahmedabad is number one in, the PGP program is because, of the kind of faculty they have. It is not necessarily technology. And the fact that students eventually become successful. So for a company of our size, the number of people that we have sent to top 20, top 30 schools is kind of lopsided. It's kind of disproportionate. So I think that really has helped us, and I really hope everyone in today's webinar eventually gets into a school of their choice, to a dream school, and hopefully that's how we can create that impact. Some free resources, just in case you have not accessed it. So there is the GMAT online trial course. So if you are looking at a flexible self-paced study program, please go ahead and sign up for the trial class. I think many of you have done so. But that's something you could do. There is a bunch of free videos that you can actually have a look at. So that's one. The second is we also have an ebook library. So we have a lot of ebooks over there. We have ebooks on, on overall GMAT, on, inequalities. We have on integrated reasoning, on even on reading comprehension. There is a handbook. So you can just go ahead and just go to this link and you can download it over there. All right. The YouTube video. So we also have a YouTube channel. So make sure that you go to the YouTube channel and yeah. So you can go to the YouTube channel and you can go ahead and, use this. So to answer your question on GRE, so we also have the same for gre.crackverbal.com, right? So this particular thing is on GMAT, but if you go to gre.crackverbal.com, we again have an online course, we have ebooks, we have videos, so you can obviously go ahead and have a look at it, all right? So that's pretty much what we have in terms of this. There is also, online testing platform, GMAT on the go. So it has a bunch of, official GMAT questions. So if you want to take like questions online, if you like to practice questions online, then you would want to head to gmatonthego.com and start solving questions over there, right? There is also the Crackverbal forum. So Crackverbal students already know about it, but in case you are looking for some questions that you can't find an answer to, you can head over to Crackverbal forums and probably type in, you'll probably see not just the question, but also a response from someone at Crackverbal end. All right, so that's pretty much what I had. Okay, so I'm gonna get now deep dive into the secrets that I mentioned, what I have to share. Okay, so I've just given it a top 5 format, but really, you could possibly look at it as it's not really in order of priority. Okay, so let's get started. The first secret, right? So when students ask me about timing on the GMAT, right? So if you were to ask me, most cases, right, people end up having a timing issue on the GMAT. I can almost always trace it back to reading comprehension, correct? So if you look at it, if you look at it, the way I see it is that, one second, let me just get the mouse working, touchpad working. So I'm just trying to adjust the mouse, just a minute. Just trying to get the... Seems to be some issue with the trackpad that I'm using. Let me just... All right, so let me just do one thing. Let me probably write the text over here, and then I'll figure out the trackpad issue. So, if you were to ask, people, and most people come with this thing, they're saying that I have timing issues on the GMAT. So let me ask you, how many of you who have taken a practice test, and you can put it in the chat window over here. Okay, how many of you who have taken the practice test have faced an issue where you ended up running out of time? Anybody face that problem? Okay. Don't raise your hands, you can just put it in the chat window. Okay, so all of you are, many of you are, happens quite often, right? Agree. Okay. So, great. So I see a lot of you have this problem with regards to timing. So what I'll do is, I'll just, give you an idea, and this is like, food for you to think. Why do you think, I mean, just look at it from a perspective of the test, right? So when you run out of time, Okay, you are actually not running out of time on question number, it's like, for example, you realize on question number 36 that you ran out of time. It is not actually question number 36 that you ran out of time, correct? It wasn't then that you realized that you ran out of time. You actually ran out of time a lot earlier, correct? So you ran out of time a lot earlier. It so happened that you discovered the problem when you are on question number 38, correct? But the problem really is not with question number 38. And when people say, so Arun, how do I fix my timing issue? So I tell them that very simple. If you are, let's say behind by 2 questions, blindly guess 2 questions, you will become on time. Students say, no, like, I mean, if I just were to blindly guess, then that's not really a strategy, right? So then that's where I, kind of talk about this. I say, timing issue. Okay, I want you to think about this. Timing issue is not the problem. Timing issue is not the diagnosis. That is not your problem. So don't tell people that I have a timing issue. See, it's like this. If you have a headache, correct? By itself, headache is not the problem. Headache is a symptom. So if you're running into timing issues, it's a symptom, it's not the problem. The problem is something else. And invariably, I end up, kind of getting the problem. I kind of feel that if you just do a math, you'll realize that invariably the problem is with reading comprehension. Okay. I don't know for what reason people say, oh, reading comprehension, you need to take more time. And the logic they have is, I have to spend, let's say, 1.5 minutes per question. So 1.5 minutes, anyways, I'm spending per question. And on top of it, I need time to read the passage. So I'll tell you the conventional way of looking at it, right? So the conventional way of looking at, or rather not the conventional way, the incorrect way of looking at it is this. Okay. If I were to look at it, I will say GMAT questions, RC questions. What they say, I will take 1.5 minutes. And let's say there are 3 to 4 questions, correct? Which means you are taking approximately anywhere between 4.5 to 6 minutes. So let's say 5 minutes. Then the rationale is, then there is the RC passage. So what people end up saying is that why RC should take time is I have to spend 5 minutes answering the questions, which is what I would take. But over and above that, I have to spend at least 5 minutes reading the passage, understanding the passage, and kind of making sense of it. So I see a lot of students spending as much as 10 minutes on GMAT RC per passage. Okay. But here is the deal, okay? If you look at it on the GMAT, right, we have a total of 75 minutes, correct? Of this, if I were to take the RC questions, we have about 14 questions in RC, correct? Now what will happen is there are 4 passages on the GMAT. And according to this logic, if you take 10 minutes each, you will end up spending 40 minutes on the overall passage, correct? Now, if you're going to spend 40 minutes per passage, what are you left with? You're left with 35 minutes, because that's the total time, for the remaining questions. There are 41 questions. So 14 of them you have answered. So how many questions? 27 questions. In verbal, if you ever end up in such a scenario that you have to answer, 27 questions in 35 minutes, trust me, it's not a position from which you would be able to, it's not a position you can salvage, correct? It's beyond that. So, okay, I think there is some problem with this. So That's the key. That the key is to understand that, look, I cannot afford, having, I can't afford the luxury of time when it comes to reading comprehension, right? It just, okay. So are all of you able to see the screen? Right? So what happens? So I want you to stop telling this that, reading comprehension, my problem is with timing. Your problem is not with timing. Your problem is with reading comprehension, how you're able to tackle that, correct? So what I would do, just one second, I think, still trying to figure out, yeah. All right. So sorry, I just got, booted out over here. Okay. So that's really the key over here. So what you have really is you don't have more than 6 to 8 minutes to actually read and answer all the questions, correct? So that's the thing you need to remember, that you have between 6 to 8 minutes for the whole passage. If you are not able to time yourself when it comes to RC, trust me, this is something that you will realize is stuff that cannot. See, what happens in the case of reading comprehension is that even if you do very poorly, right? Let's say in the case of sentence correction, is that if you do poorly on one, SC question, the damage is not very high. Right? Really, the damage is not really high, because what is going to happen then is, worst case scenario, you will spend, let's say, 2.5 minutes instead of 1.5 minutes, correct? So 1 minute extra is not really that big a problem, right? The problem happens when you look at reading comprehension, because what happens, each passage has a potential to screw up your entire timing. CR cannot do that. One question cannot do that. Sentence correction cannot do that. Reading comprehension can do that. Okay, so make sure whatever passages that you're solving, do it in 6 to 8 minutes. One tip over here, if you see in the OG, when you're practicing, you typically have around 6 questions. So students come and say, but if I have 6 questions, how many minutes should I take? Here is my thumb rule. You should still, spend only about 2 to 3 minutes on the passage when you're reading it for the first time, and you can take on an average 1.5 minutes per question, correct? So you actually take 2 to 3 minutes for the passage and about 1.5 minutes per question. As long as you are able to keep this timing in, you don't need to really worry about the overall timing. So what will happen in OG passages is that you will end up spending about 2-3 minutes reading, and then let's say there are 6 questions, correct? So you will take 3 plus 6, you'll take 9 minutes. So you'll take about 12 minutes for the passage.
It's 11 o'clock.
So what you can do is take the total number of questions in OG, multiply by 2. Correct? That will give you a good thumb rule of how many minutes you should take for that particular passage, right? But if you're going to get questions wrong, you pretty much are doomed if you get your timing wrong on reading comprehension, right? Mrinal had this question: what is the difference between RC of GMAT and CAT? So here is a deal. I think to a large extent is the same. I don't think there is a difference. The only difference obviously is GMAT is a standardized test, which means there is an adaptive algorithm that kicks in, and you get passages of varying difficulty level. Whereas on CAT, you have passages which are standardized. So it will be round about the same difficulty level for everyone else, correct? Any questions? Any questions on the timing bit? So I want you to write it down, okay? Make sure that you don't forget this because it's a very important thing to get the timing in place. Any questions on the first one? All of you clear? No questions? Excellent. So let me just move on to the next part of it. So what happens is, this is something that, goes back to the basic difference between the way we read in real life and the way we read on the GMAT, correct? See, what happens is you have to understand that in real life, there is a lot of contextual information that we bring to the passage. Okay, there is a lot of things that you already know. For example, let's take a simple scenario. What have you been reading since morning? Correct. So you probably read the newspaper. In the newspaper, you probably read about, I don't know, Nirav Modi, hashtag Finding Nemo, right? Or you probably were reading, let's say, a WhatsApp forward from your friend about something, BJP Congress, correct? Or it could be an email that you got from your boss, and just looking at the subject line, you already know what is going to be the content of that email, correct? See, what happens in life is there is so much context around things that when we read, our brain is kind of prepared, correct? Think of it this way, your brain is already warmed up, right? Your brain is already, kind of flexible and nimble. But what happens on the GMAT is, and this is where, people have a huge problem using their reading styles kind of to adapt it to the GMAT, is when they get to the GMAT and when they start solving questions, they realize that when they don't have a context, okay, when they don't have a background, because when I'm reading that passage, is the first time in my life that I'm probably reading about the topic. And I'm not very interested in that topic either, correct? So it's not that the topic is kind of exciting me. I'm reading it for the first time. And then there is the pressure of the test, correct? This is the GMAT, right? So, I have that added pressure on me. Now, when all of these, kind of things are going in your head, it is very easy to feel overwhelmed. Okay, this is where, again, if I were to ask this question to you, how many of you have had this sense where you have started reading and you realized that, so by the way, any questions, please put it on the Q&A window. Chat window is just for discussion, okay? So how many of you have felt, and you can probably put it in the chat window over here, okay? You started reading this passage and, you're not able to understand. It's just kind of feeling overwhelming. I don't think I can find a replacement for this term overwhelming. Like you're not able to make a head and tail of it. Your brain is still in a haze. You're reading it, but your brain is not registering anything. Correct? It's almost like people are taking water and throwing it on a waterproof, cement ad. You've seen that, right? Waterproof cement ad. You take water and you put it on that wall and the entire thing bounces back. Correct? So yeah, so I'm pretty sure it happens, time to time to everyone. Correct? So that's the feeling. So why do you get that feeling? Have you ever thought about it? Correct? So if you actually dig deeper, if you actually think about it, what you'll realize is the reason we have this feeling is because we do not have any anchor. See, what happens on GMAT is a large part of your skill, okay, to do well, especially on reading comprehension, is your ability to find not so much about the topic itself, but to find that one key anchor. Okay, what is that anchor? The anchor is something around which the entire, topic revolves. So it's like, so actually what has happened is I usually have a tab and I actually write it in my tab, but today my tab doesn't seem to work. So I have no idea, but I'll probably look at it later. So I'm just trying to draw it with my trackpad. So excuse my drawing, right? So it is that anchor around which everything else revolves, right? For example, let us say, at a very high level, what you're really expected to do is you're expected to understand a passage from a perspective like this, right? So let's say there is a passage on, GST impact, or rather impact of GST on the economy, correct? So let's say it has 3 paragraphs. Paragraph 1, you're going to talk about, let's say it talks about background of GST, okay, why it was introduced. Then P2 is pros and cons of GST. Then let's say final conclusion, let's say is negative. Okay. Now what happens is, your ability to find out what that passage is talking about, right, in under 2 minutes. So someone was asking me this question, right? Like, how do I actually read it? See, your skill of figuring out what is it that it's talking about at a very high level in about 2 to 3 minutes is to a large extent your how you're going to be able to do reading comprehension. How well you're going to be able to do reading comprehension will depend on that. So now what happens in this passage, I started reading it. I had no idea what it is, but I realized it was about GST, correct? Then I realized that the first paragraph is just giving some background as, it was actually, introduced when Congress was in power, and, it goes on to explain that part. So I understood that it's about the background. Then the second paragraph says, on the one hand, GST provides relief to blah, 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 blah. On the other hand, if improperly implemented, it causes issues with blah, 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 blah. Correct? So it tells me both sides of the coin, positive and negative. But then what I see in the third paragraph is that the author starts using his perspective to, kind of say that GST actually is positive, or in this case, let's say he says GST actually has the negative impact on the economy. Correct? Now, the whole idea is to find out just that one thing, that it's something that he's talking about GST. First paragraph, see, think of it this way. When you are actually solving an RC passage, right, you are actually like a bird circling a field. Okay, you don't want to really get into the details, correct? What happens, the mistake that people do is they get into details. I cringe on this, right? That students end up, reading the whole thing, with a fine-toothed comb. They go through each and every microscopic detail. So, okay, let me put it this way. I may be exaggerating it, maybe not the microscopic details, but to a large extent, they get into details. And sometimes when they see me read for the first time, they are surprised that I don't even get into the details. For me, the first read, okay, the first time that I'm going to read the passage is just to find that anchor. What is this passage talking about? Is it GST? Is it this? And this reading can be done very, very fast. Correct? If you were to ask me to read and devote all my energy into that, it will take me time. I agree. But if I'm just going to read it from a perspective of getting a very quick idea, right? I'm not going to spend time. I'm going to probably do that in, under, let's say, a minute and a half. In fact, here is the deal. People who do very well on the GMAT, my students who have gone on to score 40, 42, 44 in verbal, what I've noticed is the better they do, the lesser time they spend on reading the passage for the first time. Okay? And again, I'm going to emphasize reading the passage for the first time. Okay? I'm not saying that this is like the way you should do, but first time when you're reading, make sure you're not devoting way too much time. Your focus only is on analyzing what the focus area is. Okay. I'll just go to the questions. How to improve reading speed? So Ajay, one of the things that we discuss in the class is you cannot improve your reading speed, right? See what happens. This is a myth. Okay, and when I told you, right, 2001, I started my career with reading comprehension. So a lot of times what used to happen, no, is I used to also go, make my students take these tests where they used to measure words per minute. Okay, how fast you can read. And if there is something that I've realized in 16, 17 years of teaching reading comprehension, it is reading speed does not depend on you. See, you can improve what depends on you, correct? For example, if I were to say that you buy a lottery ticket, correct? And I say, okay, I want you to work hard and win this lottery ticket. You'll say, Arun, how is it possible, right? I mean, what do I do? Because this is not something that depends on me. It depends on something else. It depends on an external factor. Same thing for reading comprehension, correct? See, running, if I were to ask you to run faster, you can run faster. Why? Because it depends on you. You kind of control it. But how fast you think doesn't depend on you. It depends on the passage. It depends on the topic. Give me a topic which says, give me two passages. Okay, one passage 500 words, the other passage also 500 words. First passage topic is Virat Kohli the best batsman ever? Is he better than Sachin Tendulkar? Correct? And the second passage is about, let's say, a South American, banking system, which was very prevalent in the 1970s, and how people are planning to resurrect it again in Brazil and Portugal today. So very complex, dense topic. The language is very twisted, very convoluted. So if you give me these two passages, obviously my first passage, because I have context, I will start reading faster, right? So the only way you can improve reading speed is if you have context. That is exactly the point I'm trying to make over here, right? Which is why I'm saying focus only on finding that anchor. Don't try to do anything else, okay? Sony has this question. Questions are difficult to analyze in GMAT or not? Sony, I didn't really understand the question. What do you mean by are difficult to analyze in GMAT? So can you just rephrase it, please? Neelam Bhavnani had this question. Does it help to read the questions before going through the passage? Great. So Neelam, do you know that on the GMAT, you actually see just the first question, correct? You just see the first question. You don't see the rest of the questions. So, and you can't see the rest of the questions, correct? So even if you were to read the first question, would it help? I don't think so. Correct? And why I don't think so, I'll answer it shortly. I think one of the upcoming secrets is about that, why you should actually focus on reading first and then going to the questions. But, a larger thing over here is not just so much about reading the passage. The first time that you're reading a passage, as I said, you're not trying to answer the questions, right? The first time reading is just to find the anchor, is just to find that basic thing. And again, this is something that I talk about in the class. I tell students that it's like hearing a 2-year-old speak. If you hear a 2-year-old has very limited vocabulary. So what happens is, that vocabulary, so the child goes and tells the mother, mama toffee, correct? So when it says mama toffee, pretty much the mother understands, correct? The mother is not going to say, what is the subject, predicate, it's not a properly constructed sentence and so on. She's going to understand. She says, okay, it's addressed to me and the child wants toffee, correct? Now what happens when the child grows up? He says, mother, can you give me, can I buy some toffee? Right? Now he constructs a complete sentence. By the time he becomes a teenager, he will say, mama, can you please give me some allowance, pocket money, so that I can go buy myself some toffees, correct? So what happens, the same thought, mama toffee, correct, now is using a lot more words, but in reality, the message still is mama toffee, correct? The message still is fairly simple. It's straightforward. He's still asking mama toffee. But You know what happens on the GMAT? By the time it gets to GMAT level, the language becomes so convoluted that it's very hard to comprehend, correct? So if GMAT were to put the same mama toffee, this is what GMAT would say. GMAT would say, oh mother, passer of my DNA, provide me with the monetary sustenance to buy this confectionery that would help me meet my daily calorific needs, correct? But really, what is it? It's mama toffee. So what I'm basically saying over here is, and here is a good exercise that you can do. After this webinar gets over, okay, pick up any 2 or 3 good passages. You can find it from OG. And what you do, don't look at the questions. Okay, don't look at the questions. Don't even try to look at the questions. Try to read it very quickly in about 90 seconds and try to see if you can write down in a few words what you think is the gist of whatever you read. Okay, but this is a very important skill that you need to develop before you get into. So someone asked me, should I pen down the basic idea of each paragraph? Is it necessary? Super necessary. So in the GMAT course that we have at Crackverbal, so that's a technique that we teach basically around mapping, right? So how do I create a map? And again, there are a lot of myths around mapping. People say that you have to understand everything and it has to be an accurate summary of whatever you have read, correct? I just think it's BS because you can't really accurately summarize everything here. Like if I were to read a passage today, do you think I would be able to accurately summarize everything? It's not possible. So there are a couple of tweaks that you need to learn when it comes to mapping, but that's a separate part, okay? But to answer that question, yes, it is important to write it down. Monica had a question, which is, if I've gone through the passage once and understood the anchor, but did not understand what the passage is explaining, then how can I answer the questions without having the basic understanding? How do I handle such situations? Monica, the idea is that you understand the basic, you go to the question, and then you are anyways going to go back to the passage, right? You're anyways going to be reading the passage again, correct? So think of it this way, okay? Think of it this way. Let us say there is a game that we are playing, okay? Or let's say there is a house that you're visiting, correct? So when you visit the house for the first time, or let's say when you check into a hotel, correct? What happens? You just go into the room. What do? You just check, okay, bed is fine. Then you just kind of see if the curtain, what is the view from the room? Then you quickly get into the bathroom. You check if the bathroom is fine, correct? Now, what happens is, you just do that and then you come out of the room, okay? Now, someone says, okay, so can you tell me, do they provide you with shower caps? What are you going to say? Hey, you know what? Wait a second. I'll go back to the room. Now, what will I do? I'll go to the bathroom and I'll just check whether it has a shower cap. Now, that's a different thing. And I'm going to get to that when I talk about the next secret. What I'm saying here is the first time that you're entering into the hotel room. The first time that you're entering into the hotel room, please don't check what is the temperature of the air conditioning. Don't check what all channels you're getting on the TV. Don't check what toiletries they've provided to you in the bathroom, correct? Don't check whether they have given you a complimentary pair of food from the mini bar, correct? So don't do all of that, correct? That's what I'm saying. Just get enough idea for you so that when you answer the questions, you can go back. Priyanshu had this question, what need to modify in this strategy for the 4th GMAT passage usually come up in the last 7-8 questions? Priyanshu, that's a good question because what it tells me is you are thinking of reading comprehension as the first passage, different strategy, second passage, different strategy, third different, fourth different. I'm saying you should have the same strategy for all the 4 passages, okay? If your approach is same, right? It doesn't matter if passage number 1, passage number 4, passage number 40, correct? It doesn't matter because the way I look at a reading comprehension passage is in isolation. And if I'm able to do well, then it doesn't matter when it appears on the GMAT, correct? So you should not have a separate strategy for, first passage versus 4th passage. Ajay, if you think about it, your question, right? I found RC tough because options are nearly same. Now, that is because fundamentally, you are probably looking at it a little differently. So Ajay, what I'll do, I'll answer your question when I get to the next secret, okay? And this is the third secret. I have had so many students fixate over understanding the passage. But what you will realize on the GMAT is it is not so much about understanding the passage. It is about getting the answers correct. That is what you're going to get the points for, right? A person who scores a 760 or a 770 on the GMAT, nobody is going to come and say, "Acha, passage samajh aaya kya?" It doesn't matter if he understood the passage or not. Okay, what matters is if he or she was able to answer the questions correctly. And I know this is very fundamental, correct? It's very basic, but I think students tend to forget this at times. Okay, and this kind of goes with secret number 2. So what did I say about secret number 2? That the first time that you're reading the passage, you really are getting an overview. Why are you getting that overview? Because I'll go back to secret number 1. We have only 6 to 8 minutes per passage. In 6 to 8 minutes, if you expect me to read a passage and answer questions correctly, and if answering questions correctly has more weightage, or rather is the only thing that is going to matter, then I want to spend more time answering questions. Correct? I want to spend more time answering questions, which means I will take more time to answer questions. So now I'll go back to the hotel room wala analogy, right? So first, what did you do? You came into the hotel room, quickly checked what all was there. Now you go out of the hotel, go out of the room. Now people are going to ask you questions, correct? So at that point, what happens if they ask you questions, you cannot go back and you have to be very careful in answering questions. See, think about it from GMAT reading comprehension perspective. RC is the only topic where the answers are given to you first and then they are asking you questions. Correct? So first I'm telling you my name is Arun. Then I'm saying, okay, what is my name? Correct? So, by nature, what you'll realize is that GMAT test setters, they will give you options that are very confusing. Okay? They will give you questions that are worded in a way that it will take you time to understand. But that's the nature of reading comprehension. That is the nature of the game. That's what you need to understand, right? So what I'm going to do is, just as an example, I'm going to be sharing a passage, okay? So once I share the passage, post that, I will, kind of ask you a question on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, 60 seconds for reading the passage, okay? So 60 seconds, very short passage, time starts now. Just read the passage, do nothing else. All right, 60 seconds over. Okay, so just on the chat window, you can let me know whether you read the passage and you were able to understand it. Yes or no. Okay, Neelam, okay, Ajay, okay. Just say whether you're able to read it. It was a very short passage, right? 2 paragraphs. Okay, very good. Okay. So Ashutosh, read, did not understand, does not make sense, no? Right? Okay. So why I'm giving this passage, or why I wanted to give this, is if you really look at this particular thing, correct? And this is something that we take in the GMAT class in Bangalore. So some of you from the classroom may be aware of this passage, correct? That essentially it just says, in smaller groups, correct? He talks about this thing called vigilant behavior, correct? So I'm going to use the word VB, right? So he talks about vigilant behavior. in smaller groups. It's actually pretty hard to draw with this with the touchpad. So I'm just going to go and use the text box over here. So on one hand, it is to avoid predators, correct? And the other reason is to find food. Now just read it. Okay, the passage is fairly straightforward. There is really nothing much to it, correct? And to a large extent in 60 seconds, you can read it. So what I do is I do not get into the details, correct? Just look at the second sentence of the first. If you look at it totally, there are only 5 sentences, correct? So what is happening is when I'm reading, let's take the second paragraph, second line, okay? Second sentence. M. Crick has discovered that large white storks look up more often when in smaller flocks than when in larger ones, solely as a consequence of poor feeding conditions. You know, when I read it, I have no idea what the hell consequence of poor feeding conditions are. I'm not really investing time and energy to read it at that point or understand it at that point. I just got that overall idea that it's about vigilant behavior. I know that first paragraph talks about avoiding predators, second talks about finding food. Okay, now focus on this second sentence, right, of the first paragraph. So in the second sentence, you have, just read this, right? Very complex sentence. You know, very honestly, I do not have the intelligence to process this when I'm reading it for the first time. If individuals on the edge of a group are more vigilant because they are at greater risk of being captured, than individuals on average would have to be more vigilant in smaller groups because the animals on the periphery of a group form a greater proportion of the whole group as the size of the group diminishes. Wow. I wouldn't be able to get it, right? So what do? I don't try to understand it at this point, correct? That's what I'm saying. This is that first visit to the hotel room. Okay, I'm just checking in. I'm not started to stay here. I've just checked in. It's the first 30 seconds. I just got an idea. Now what I'm going to do is, now let me show you what would happen if you have a question. And this time, for answering the question, I'm going to give you, the same time. I'm going to give you, let's say 90 seconds for answering the question. Okay, so the question coming up. Okay, all right. Last 10 seconds. Make sure you have a response with you. Okay, 90 seconds, done, right? So don't tell me what the response is, okay? So many of you might have already seen this, so, don't tell me what the response is. That's not the important thing. But what did you realize? Okay, so if you were to ask me, what I would have realized when I saw this passage is, it probably took you more time reading the question and going through the answer options Then it took for you to read the whole passage. I gave you 60 seconds to read the passage. You did a fairly decent job, but 90 seconds could still be a lot less for answering the questions. Do you agree? How do you think 90 seconds was? Was 90 seconds looking too less? Right? Welcome to the world of GMAT. This is the one thing that I tell students, right? That if you see this, correct, this is a classic case where, the question would take more time than reading the passage, right? So which is where you have to start understanding that, look, I'm not going to get points on the GMAT. It's easy to say 760. It's easy to say 40, 42 in verbal. But if you are getting a 40, 42 in verbal, you are expected to solve questions like this, right? Now, again, the idea is that, since we are on this question, let me just take a stab at answering this, right? Now, the beauty of this question is, let us assume that I did not understand the entire question itself. So what happens? I read the question. It can be inferred from the passage that in species in which vigilant behavior is directed at predators. I know it is in first paragraph because predators is mentioned in the first paragraph only. The tendency of the animals to be more vigilant in smaller groups than in larger ones would most likely be minimized if which one of the following were true. I read it again. Tendency of animals to be more vigilant in smaller groups than larger ones would most likely be minimized if which of the following were true. Now, at this point, what happens? My brain, I'm not able to really understand what the question is trying to say, but hell, I know where the answer is, correct? So what do I do at this point? I don't trust my memory. On the GMAT, please never trust your memory, okay? Go back and read that. So in the first paragraph, there are two sentences. First sentence, second sentence. Guess where the answer is? I know it is in the second sentence because first sentence to just chuma is saying vigilant behavior is aimed at predators. But second sentence is where possibly the answer is. So let me read it. If individuals on the edge of a group are more vigilant because they are at greater risk of being captured, then individuals on an average would have to be more vigilant because the animals on the periphery form a greater proportion. You know what? Even after reading it, I still don't understand. You realize my situation, right? I didn't understand the question, okay? I didn't even understand the sentence where the answer is. But remember, I have a sense of what it is. I know it is about predators, and I know that he is talking something about being in the periphery. Being in the periphery means being in the edge of a group, right? Now what I do, I see that this is an inference-based question, correct? So what happens is the moment I realize that it's an inference-based question, I also know that the answer on the GMAT can never be what I think. See, GMAT is never going to say, according to you, what is the answer? Because according to you, though, anything can be the answer. No, you can even say E and you can justify why E is right, correct? But it will always be according to the author. Inference is always according to what the author is saying. In other words, what it means is the answer has to be found in the passage. If there is something mentioned and it's not mentioned in the passage, it means cannot be the answer. So let's look at it. Answer option A. The vigilance of animals on the periphery of a group, okay, periphery, good, it's mentioned, always exceeded that of animals located in its interior, even when predators were not in the area. Is there any mention of predators being in the area or not being in the area? Is it that vigilant behavior will increase when predators are in the area? Probably, right? But hey, you know what? All of this is not given. Your imagination can now go into an overdrive and say, oh yeah, if there is a tiger in my area, I'll become more vigilant. Hence, don't use all of that. Is there anything that the author is talking about predators being in the area, not being in the area? He is not mentioning. Answer option A for alpha goes off. Correct? Remember, I didn't understand the question. I didn't understand even the sentence in the passage. I just got a faint sense of what it is. B, the risk of capture for individuals in a group was the same, whether they were located in the interior or its periphery. Great. Whether it's located in the interior or its periphery, I now know that this is something mentioned. I do not know whether it's right or wrong. I know it is mentioned. Interior, periphery, something. No, I'm going to hold on to B. C says animals on the periphery tended to be less capable of defending themselves than animals located in the interior. Is there any mention about their ability to defend themselves? Correct? See, I could be very vigilant if a tiger comes in front of me, but I would probably be dead, right? Because I can't defend myself. So there is no mention of, whether they can defend themselves. C for Charlie goes off. D says animals on the periphery tended to bear marks that were more distinctive. See, here is where what happens, the human brain, it starts imagining, right? It says, okay, they may have mark, which means this predator will go search for that particular, animal which has that mark. Nowhere is it mentioned. Don't assume all of these things. D for Delta also goes off, right? E for Echo. Animals on the periphery of a group tended to have shorter lifespans. Any mention of shorter lifespans? Whether they live long or whether they live, shorter doesn't really matter, not mentioned. So at this point, what happens? I do not know why, but I know because A, C, D, E cannot be the answer, B for Bravo has to be the answer. Not because I love B for Bravo, okay? But because all the 4 answer options are wrong and B seems to be talking what the passage is saying. See, if you really look at it technically, there is a technical reason why B is wrong, right? Because mathematically, this is true. Thus, in a smaller group, your chances of probability of being in the edge are more than in a larger group. That's what he's saying. And he says, now, if I were to take away that factor, then whether you are in a smaller group or a larger group, doesn't matter. But hey, I would have answered it if I had known all of that. But I'm just saying that I just answered this very tough question without even getting into the details. Correct? So that is really the third secret, which is focus on getting the answers. Don't focus on reading and understanding. Same passage, you could have spent 5 minutes reading, understanding every word. Right? It doesn't matter. GMAT is not going to reward you on that. Realize what GMAT is testing you on, okay? And try to focus your energy over that. Praveen had this question, how much time to give for mapping while reading? Mapping, reading, understanding, processing, everything should happen in the first 2 minutes. See, first 2 minutes, as I said, right? Going into the hotel room, quickly checking, everything is there. Okay, hotel is, bathroom is clean, view is good, AC is working, TV is working, beds are clean, good, come on. That's all I want you to do in the first 2 minutes, right? And because we are reading it, we will quickly make a map of what we have read, okay? But again, that comes into mapping. I'm not going to get into mapping today because it's beyond the scope of what we would be able to cover in a webinar, all right? Fourth, adaptive algorithm doesn't work within an RC passage. Now, it's important that you understand this part. See, what happens is when you talk about the adaptive algorithm, correct? So I'm not going to get into the details, but adaptive algorithm, each assesses after each question what level you are at. Anybody who doesn't understand the adaptive algorithm, you can post on the chat window in case you don't. So this is a blog, so you can just go ahead and just look up this blog, okay? So please, all questions don't post on chat window. I'm going to be looking at it in the Q&A window, okay? So please post it in the Q&A window. All right. Now coming to the GMAT RC, what happens over here is your entire, all the 3 or 4 questions, okay? So it's important that you understand adaptive algorithm doesn't work within an RC passage. What this means for you is you can guess one question at random if you are falling short on time. So see, the 4 questions that you're going to see, okay, let's assume you get 4 questions on a RC passage. So you don't need to really worry about, you need to make sure that you do well in all of these 4 questions, because your level is judged by your performance on these 4 questions as a whole. It is not your performance on question number 1, question number 2, question number 3, question number 4. What it means is you can treat all 4 questions equally. Now, I don't have a love for question number 1, 2, 3, or 4. All I need to do is I need to get as many questions as possible correct. Okay. Now, if I had 4 questions, ideal world, I will solve all 4 questions. And I will get all 4 questions right. But in a not so ideal world, okay, if I am kind of solving questions, which question would I end up guessing? If I had to guess one question, can you just go ahead and let me know in the chat window? If there is one question on which I have to guess, which question would it be? Whatever you think. The last one? Why, Gaurav? Why last one? Why 2 or 3? Why question number 3? I'm still not getting the answer. Why should it be question number 1, Alka? Correct. Any question, but what should be the quality of the question? On which question should I guess? Why should you guess on the one that asks you about the main idea? Right. So what you're really doing, correct. Correct. Ritasha, Gaurav, it is the one, Monica, Alka, all of you are kind of getting that. Okay, Shreya, right? So what you have to do is you have to guess on that one question, correct, that you do not, will take time. See, what happens is, if you were to ask me, main idea questions, big picture questions, according to me, are easy. Because if you have read the passage, you spend 2 minutes, right? You come out and they say, okay, what kind of hotel do you think? It's a 3-star hotel or a 5-star hotel? You know what? You get a sense, you just been to the room. You will be able to figure out it's a 5-star or a 3-star hotel, correct? So you'll just come out and say it's a 5-star hotel, right? Because the ambience looks like awesome, correct? Whether you're right or wrong is a different thing. But my point is, such questions would not take time. But what if you had a question that says, which of the following predictive statements do you think the author would most likely agree with, except? Now, what it means is you have 5 answer choices, 4 of which are actually correct. And one of them that is incorrect is your answer. But for that, laboriously, you have to pound through each and every answer option. Correct? So what I would do is, I would just say, let me wait for that one question where I want to guess. It can be question number 1, can be question number 4, can be question number 2, can be question number 3, doesn't matter. Correct? But learn to guess on, because I'll tell you what, I've had this very bizarre strategy that some students have had, and I don't know why, but usually when they start the course, they kind of sometimes come and say, Arun, I have heard that, or I'm thinking that I should guess on one complete RC passage. Anyone in today's webinar harboring such a thought, please kill the thought, okay? Just kill it. You cannot afford to guess an entire RC passage, right? Because what happens is, among the 4 passages, one of them is completely experimental. I don't know if you know this. So one passage will be a dummy passage. It will be a passage which will not go towards your final 3-digit GMAT score. So what happens if you end up guessing one passage and it's not an experimental passage? That means you are going to get 1 out of 3 questions, 1/3 of the questions on reading comprehension wrong straight away. Correct? So bad strategy, don't do that. right? Instead of that, what I would do is, if I feel that, I'm still having a challenge with timing, I would still go ahead and mark one answer wrong, which is this, not the last one, not the first one. Okay, it doesn't really matter. The order doesn't matter. For me, what matters is whether that question is taking more time or not. All right. Okay. So Gaurav, to answer your question, how will I know whether the next way? I don't know. But see, that doesn't matter, no, because my overall performance is taken as at the end of the 4 questions, correct? So whether the next one is easy, not easy, all of that really doesn't matter. Okay, I have a question, 2 questions over here. First, anonymous attendee, skim and mapping, read the question and option, reread. Yeah, pretty much. Okay, that should be the approach. Ritasha, for me, attempting a question without understanding the passage. See, why would you, see, again, I'm going to go back to this, right? So in fact, the 5th secret is for you, Ritasha. Okay, the 5th secret is, you need to understand that there are 2 reading styles over here, okay? The first reading style is called skimming. What is skimming? Skimming is when I read without knowing what to expect. When you take the morning newspaper and you start reading it, you really don't know what's going to be. I mean, you have a sense that maybe there'll be something on politics, there'll be something on sports, something on current affairs, something on economy, but you really don't know what the newspaper has. Let us say you have 5 minutes, you're quickly having breakfast, you're getting late for work, and you have the newspaper in your hand. What do? You do skimming, right? See, the way your brain reads is going to be very different, because your brain is going to think, what is it that I am interested in? It's not trying to read everything. It's trying to say, okay, anything interesting? Let me just go through it. Now let's compare that with another style of reading. Remember, these are 2 different types of reading, correct? The other type of reading is called scanning. What happens in scanning is I go to a specific thing. Let's say earlier there used to be something called as telephone directory. Okay, I'm not sure if any one of you knows what a telephone directory is anymore, but we had telephone directories in the good old days when we had landline, correct? Or let's take classifieds, right? So if you're looking for a 2 BHK apartment, and let's say there is a classified and you're looking at it in Mumbai, right? So there is Andheri, there is Malad, there is, all of these places. You're not going to go alphabetically, correct? You're not going to go area by area. What you're going to do is you're going to quickly scan for the right area, for the right budget, for a 2 BHK. What are you doing then? Then you're not passively reading, seeing what interests you. Then you're actively reading. Skimming is passive, scanning is active. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read actively in order to find a particular answer, correct? Now, what happens on the GMAT, as you would realize, is we have to alternate between skimming and scanning. In fact, you need to do skimming the first time. So first, when you're reading, going back to secret number 2, which is you need to find the anchor. So when you're reading the anchor, you're skimming, correct? When you go read the question, understand what the question is all about, then you go back to the passage and you read the passage again. That time, however, you're scanning, which means you're reading with an intention of answering the question, right? So going back to the last question that Ritasha had for me, right? That would be the answer, right, Ritasha? That I am reading the first time, I have this tremendous guilt almost, correct? Which says, Arey, mereko, if I don't understand, how will I answer the question? But you know what you're doing? You're just reading it just to get a sense. You're not reading it to answer. When you look at the question, at that point, you're going to say, now let me go back to the passage. I'm going to read it again. So the first time when you're reading, if you're feeling stressed that I'm not able to understand everything, just pat yourself in your back and say, no, going back to 3 Idiots. With 3 Idiots, what he say? No stress, no pressure. What does he say? What's that term? All is well. Correct? So you're going to tell yourself, all is well, no problem. Even if I don't understand this, when I go to the questions, when I read the question, I'm going to come back to you. So that particular sentence which is stressing you out, you just need to tell that sentence, don't worry, I'll come back to you. But when I'm scanning, when I'm answering the questions. All right? So that's Monica question, how to find out the experimental question in GMAT. I wish there was some magic by which we could get to know what the experimental question is on the GMAT. Unfortunately, there is no such way. There is no way we can find out the experimental questions, because if we get to know what is the experimental questions, they will cease to be experimental, right? So then they will not be experimental because people already know which one is experimental, correct? So someone said that there are no 5 secrets, but this is the 5th one, right? 4, this is 3, this is 2, this is 1. So the first one, just doing a recap, timing, as I said, it's a symptom. You will have to do RC passage in 6 to 8 minutes. If you don't do it, you're doomed. Okay. Second one, find the anchor. I gave you a homework exercise. Take 2 or 3 passages, spend 1.5 minutes. Just look at what is the core thing, right? You're skimming, remember. And when you're skimming, you don't need to remember everything. You just need to get an overall topography of where things are. Third one, as I explained to you, using this example, you don't need to understand what the passage is. You just need to answer the questions correctly. So focus all your time and energy in eliminating the wrong answer choices so you get to the right answer choice. Don't fixate on reading the passage the first time around. Fourth one, because the adaptive algorithm doesn't work within the RC passage, you can guess. And if you want to guess the question that is going to take the most time. And also the other point that I said, out of the 4 passages, one of them is going to be experimental. We don't know which one, correct? 5th, learn to alternate between skimming, which is reading without understanding, or rather without knowing what to expect, whereas scanning is specifically going back to the passage and answering questions about it, all right? So I'll just take a couple of questions. Shreya, how can I prepare more strategically for all vocab-based questions in GRE? Shreya, you don't need to really worry about it, okay? So if you were to ask me vocab-based questions, not a big deal. I just feel that, it'll be in line number 3, okay? What is the meaning of this word? So if you know the meaning of that word, you don't need to prepare for it separately. Sony, we will be doing sessions. As long as you're marked on Crackverbal emails, you're receiving it, you will be getting intimation about the next session. Ritasha, if I guess 1 question out of 4, will it cost me a lot of numbers? Ritasha, ideal world, you want to get an 800. You get a 51 quant, 51 verbal. You blast it out of the water, correct? If you get that, don't guess on any question, get all of it right. But let's be realistic. You're not going to get 800. I'm not saying you cannot. Let me rephrase it. You can get 800, right? But is that really your objective, right? Because I'm telling you, people scoring 760, 770 will also guess at some point. So please don't make guessing your enemy. Guessing is your friend. If it's used intelligently, you'll be able to reap benefits, correct? Where to, Ajay, always try to practice from official sources only. Don't go for non-official sources. So that's really my advice to you. So you have the official guide. I give you GMAT. There is this other thing that I gave you, which is GMAT on the go. So that also contains some passages from official questions. You may want to use that as well, correct? So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I had. So any questions, anything that you had for me? Anything else? So let me just go ahead and so just the last question, just to make sure that whatever we had, whether the question actually ended up, whether it. Okay, meanwhile, let me answer. Sony, GMAT verbal guide questions are enough to get better. Yeah, GMAT verbal guide is a good place to begin, right? So you can do that. Shreya will be taken. Yeah, Shreya. So for GRE, we will have separate. In fact, I think there is a session tomorrow on GRE. Okay, just check out. So tomorrow we actually have a session on GRE. So you may want to take that also. And pretty much that's all. So good. We started on time and we are ending it round about on time. So I wish you a great rest of the day. Okay, and a great rest of the weekend actually. And keep practicing and make sure you're doing you're practicing more on GMAT. All right. Thanks a lot and bye.